Hi there.
Morning.
Hello.
Ooh, looking forward to this.
We're both feeling slightly stressed.
Yeah,
Good.
oh, I bet. I would be.
Just going for loo and getting ready.
Yeah.
Can you hear us okay?
Yeah.
Am I right in thinking that it's you, Sona and Vidyamala, leading this session?
That's correct.
Okay, I'll spotlight you and let everyone in. Is that okay?
Yeah, lovely.
Break a leg.
Thank you. I don't want to break anything else.
No, maybe not. Maybe not.
Good. So we're on the iPad, so we can't actually see if everyone's here yet. What's the...
Not quite.
Oh, it's only 10:46, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most of them are here though.
Who's that, Lizzie or Caroline?
It's Caroline this morning.
Hi, Caroline.
Hello.
Can you see?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a reflection out of my glasses. Mind you, I don't really need to see, do I? I'm going to be talking to you, actually. We could turn a little bit more this way, because we're in the conversation.
Yes. But no, I think it's quite good. I don't know, what do you think? Should we look at you or at each other?
Bit of both.
But it's both.
There's that big blank wall behind you as well, so if you could go back into it a bit. That's better.
Yeah, that's very good. Okay, I think we'll begin. I feel sort of miles away from you and miles away from everyone over there.
Sorry?
I'm going to come a bit closer.
Okay, good.
All right, we're going to begin, everybody. Yeah, so this morning we're trying something new, which is where Sona and I are going to have a conversation about the spiral path, effectively. And we've been practicing, because we live in the same house, so we've been practicing over breakfast. And I feel quite confident it'll be interesting certainly be interesting for us and hopefully for other people. And the first thing I want to say actually is regarding social distancing, that we do live in the same house, which is why we are sitting close to each other, but we strongly adhere to the government guidelines on social distancing more generally. So I think it's good just to make it clear that we are in a bubble. So this is an experiment on two fronts. One is it's a kind of sharing and a live conversation about the spiral path, about moving towards freedom more deeply, which is what we're all engaged with, I think. It's also a conversation to see, it's an experiment to see if we can have a conversation as opposed to intermittent monologues, which can happen. So for us as well, it's going to be an active experience of deep listening to one another and sharing our own experience. And we think we've got a secret code, which is if one of us is going on too much, because we both can talk at length, we'll scratch our heads. And that will be a sign, okay, wrap it up.
What happens if I've got an itch?
If you've got an itch, then I don't know.
Don't scratch it.
Yeah, don't scratch it, yeah. So it's hopefully we're going to be exemplifying deep listening as well as sharing. Okay, so on the retreat so far, we've been going very deeply into how to be present, how to turn towards our experience appropriately.
Don't let your voice drop.
Don't let my voice drop.
Yeah.
One of you on the team, if at any point you can't hear us, just unmute yourselves and let us know. Yeah, so we've been doing all this work around how do we rest with our present moment experience in a non-reactive way. And Vishwapani the other day introduced that really fantastic model of the, he called it the stress cycle. And we can also see it as the wheel and the spiral in terms of our Buddhist terminology. So the reactive cycle is where we're just going round and round, compulsively reacting to our Vedana, craving the pleasant, pushing away the unpleasant, and zoning out, I think, is what we do with the neutral. And he said that was based on avoidance. So it's a kind of avoidance stance to our direct experience. And then he very tantalizingly introduced what happens if we approach our direct experience. And then we can have this creative cycle. So today we're going to really look at that. It feels like we've done a lot of work around how do we acknowledge, recognize the reactive cycle and hopefully lessen it. But today we're hoping to explore, well, what is the experience of the more creative spiral, the more creative mind states that will arise if we're able to be with our experience and approach it as opposed to avoid it. And of course, by approach, we're meaning this kind of open, receptive awareness. It isn't, the other day I talked about the octopus, which is where we're overwhelmed by our experience. We're kind of staring at it and it's the only thing. And then it just becomes really dominant and we lose breadth. So by approach, we're meaning a open, broad, receptive awareness to whatever's arising and passing in each moment. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the very beginning of the spiral path. So the spiral path teaching is the first two steps are dukkha and then faith, or dukkha and Sraddha, or unsatisfactoriness and then faith. And this is so fascinating and I think sometimes quite hard to understand. Why does faith arise out of dukkha? Why does faith arise out of dukkha? Scratching his head, meaning I'm going on too long, I think.
So what is Dukkha, Vidyamala?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I was coming to that. Well, here I'm going to just say a moment's gratitude to Nagabodhi, who used to run Wintour's publications. And there's this book, The Guide to the Buddhist Path. And everything in here is now in the, what's it called?
Complete Works.
The Complete Works, thank you. I saw all these beautiful volumes, but the words fell out of my head. Complete Works. And there's a really fantastic chapter in here on the wheel and the spiral, or a couple of chapters. And Bhante describes what we mean by dukkha in this context as a sense of life never being quite right. So the word do, means something like ill, bad, incorrect, improper. And ka is based on chaka, which means wheel. So we'll all probably be familiar with the image of the ill-fitting chariot wheel. So it's interesting that dukkha is a literal translation of the ill-fitting chariot wheel. Obviously, this is contextual in ancient India, but we can just all imagine that there we are living in a traditional culture millennia ago, and we're driving along roads, lots of potholes, no suspension, going along, and it's, you know, there's just this sense of jarring, and Bhante talks about it as a kind of jarring quality to everyday life, a vague discomfort, the sense that even when things are going really, really well, there's a kind of unease, because of course when things are going well, there's that fear of that ending. You know, you just don't want it to end. So that's the dukkha that we're talking about here. And then what happens is we start searching for something else, where there's this longing, surely there's another way. Surely I can find a wiser, more satisfying way of living. And then we come across the Dharma and it's like, oh yes, you know, what the Buddha says is true. And it's interesting, I'll just finish here and then ask Sona some questions, but it's an emotional response. If this is important, so Sraddha, it's not intellectual. And Bante says it's the emotional response of what is ultimate in us to what is ultimate in the universe. I really love that. The emotional response of what is ultimate in us to what is ultimate in the universe. So there's a sense of meeting. It's yes, yes, this is the doorway to freedom. I can follow this path. And in Buddhism, it's expressed as the 3 jewels, the teaching, what the Buddha's given us in the teaching of the enlightenment as possible. There's the path and the teachings, and then we've got the community around us. So, Sona, I'd like to hear from you. How's that unpacked in your own life? So, have you had an experience of the ill-fitting chariot wheel, sort of dukkha? And how has faith come out of that for you?
Well, I haven't really, as you probably know, I haven't really experienced a lot of physical pain in my life. But as a child, I experienced enormous suffering from kind of what you could call existential dukkha, so more a philosophical problem. It started when I was 7 or 8, when I was trying to work out how the universe began, and came to the conclusion that it couldn't have possibly began, because there couldn't have been a before the beginning. And this completely freaked me out, because I kind of felt everything I thought was real around me isn't necessarily real, because there was no explanation of this. And it had an enormous emotional impact on me, that I immediately started feeling nauseous. Kind of this, I had so much fear about this incomprehensibility that kind of became clear. I mean, it was quite a childish way of just going back in time, and then what was before that, and then realised there was nothing before that, and then realising, well, it can't be something beginning out of nothing, and how did nothing ever get there, or something like that.
So did you have a sort of sense of terror, like, do I really exist? Is that part?
It wasn't so much did I exist, it was just like raw fear of incomprehensibility of how anything could exist.
Mm.
And I came to the conclusion that the word God just represented no one knows, I don't know. So you say, well, who created the universe? God. And that just meant I don't know. So I tried to live with that. Then I became quite adept at distracting myself from it. So I do anything but to think about stars and universes and galaxies and things, infinity. And I think when I was 13, I discovered that actually I worked out that probably my mind was only capable of dealing with a small fraction of existence, and there was something outside that, which another faculty that could maybe make sense of it. This went on till I was about 18. This would have been in the late 1960s, and I had a kind of dream where a woman in white, a very kind of Kuan Yin type figure, appeared in the dream, and after a conversation with her, she said, well, it's only the going that's important. So for some reason, my whole being relaxed from all this kind of fear of beginnings and ends. How did the universe begin and how did it end? And, well, it wasn't the universe, it was everything. And it was just the going. It was kind of like the first insight of mindfulness, I suppose, I had, that was just the present moment, just the going.
So she was in a way saying, don't worry about where you're going or where you've come from, just...
Yeah.
It's all about the going. That's really...
The conversation was like, where are we going? She said, just there. And I said, well, what's there? She said, just there. And I said, well, there must be something there. And she says, no, it's the going that's important.
Wow. Yeah.
And I suppose that kind of set off something in me. And this is what I find rather mysterious about life, is that something sort of emerges as though you start aligning yourself with something that's real. And not long after that, I came across yoga. Then that brought me to Loka Mitra, who brought me to Bhante, introduced me to Bhante, and started attending Bhante's lectures. And it's just seemed to reinforce this this kind of little bit of wisdom that I picked up, that just was a release, a relief. And I think this must have given me great confidence right from the beginning, and in Bhante and in the Dharma, and the Buddha. And subsequently, I discovered all sorts of other things. So it was like a confidence that grew, just like everything broke somehow and something burst through into my being.
So what was it about the Dharma, when you came across it, what was it that kind of resonated with that experience that you'd had out of the dukkha? Because I'm guessing there was a resonance, and you thought, oh yes, I can follow this path.
Yeah, I'll have to think about that one. And so I can ask you while I'm thinking about it, to just say if you've had any experience like that.
Because the reason I ask that is because it's interesting, isn't it, that like Bhante thinks an emotional response of what's in us to the universe, and it's, oh yes, I can follow this path, because Shraddha has to be a sort of action of confidence.
Yeah.
And interesting that Shraddha translates as confidence,
Yeah.
which I guess is both confidence in the path and confidence in oneself,
Yeah.
which is what you've articulated. Yeah. So I think for me, well, I was brought up in New Zealand, so the kind of existential dukkha wasn't that great as a child, because it was a very, very fortunate conditions to grow up in, beautiful country, food on the table. I could roam around the hills as a child. I felt very safe. I was very fit. Had ecstatic experiences in the mountains. But then when I was 16, as you know, I injured my spine. So then I had a lot of, what in Buddhism is called dukkha, which is just the frank suffering of being in this body. And that was really, really challenging and torturous, I would say. And then at a certain point, after many years actually the thing I did was denial. I was just very good at pushing the whole thing away and pretending it wasn't happening, which means I wasn't experiencing the suffering so directly, but I had this horrible kind of dry, alienated, driven existence. So I suppose the existential thing there is, you're running away from yourself, and deep down you think, I'm not going to be able to keep doing this forever. But nonetheless, I was quite good at it. And then after about 10 years, actually, I was in hospital having had a big crisis. And I was taught a very, very simple meditation practice by the hospital chaplain. And that's the first time I experienced directly that I had this quality of awareness. I think up till then, did I have a mind? I wouldn't have ever asked myself that question. I was just kind of trapped in this compulsive denial. But put very simply, he did this very simple little exercise, and my subjective experience changed. So that was, you often say, well, that blew my mind. The fact that my subjective experience of dukkha, of pain, could change depending on what I did with my awareness was really, really extreme. I think because it rose up out of hell, it meant that the contrast was so dramatic. And so then I started searching. So then I was intensely, very intensively searching for the answer to the mind, the answer to awareness, which brought me to Triratna, brought me to the Dharma after a couple of years, and then it was like, oh yes.
Well, I think I know you've mentioned this several times, both in your book and you've told your life story, that you also heard a voice in
that's right.
dark night of the soul as well, didn't you?
Yeah, that's really
Say
interesting.
something about that.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, it's I hadn't thought that this voice, like, where do these voices come from? Who knows? But yeah, when I was really in the dark night of the soul, and absolutely tortured by physical pain, and I had this whole big drama going on in my mind about how could I get through till the morning. I was just obsessed about how could I get through till the morning, for various reasons, which I'm It's quite a long story. I don't want to tell it right now for time purposes. But it was like, oh my God, I can't bear it. How can I get through till the morning? And I felt like my head was just like absolutely in a vice, and it was getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And then this voice came in. I don't know whether it was female, male, or something. I can't remember that. It was more like a sort of booming quality. You don't have to get through till this morning. You don't have to get through till the morning. You just have to live this moment, and this one, and this one, and this one. And it felt like something very wise, sort of erupting from somewhere, someplace, who knows. And again, that's been a lifelong quest. What does that mean? So in a way, everything I've done in my life since then has been trying to more deeply understand what does it mean to be fully present.
Good.
Okay, so I think we've established that we both have dukkha, and we both, out of that has come this longing for something different, and then eventually we've stumbled across the Dharma, the three jewels, and felt a sense of recognition, I guess. So then in the traditional teachings of the spiral path, we've got lots of other stages, which is very interesting. So you've got dukkha, and then you have Sraddha, it's confidence that can arise. In our case, we've explained that. Then out of that comes joy. Out of that comes rapture, or pretty. So you get these kind of high energy states, or higher energy states, freedom, sort of release of energy. And then you get calm. Then you get bliss. Then you get samadhi, concentration. More in the sense of unification and integration, not just a kind of narrow concentration, but everything's pulling in the same direction. And then we get knowledge and vision of things as they really are, which is traditionally seen as insight. And then out of that, you get withdrawal, dispassion, freedom, knowledge of the destruction of the asharas, and enlightenment. So we're probably not going to deal with the later stages because we're going to try and stay with our direct experience. So let's talk a bit about why joy and rapture, calm, bliss, these kind of qualities of very, very positive emotions, expansive emotions, why do they arise out of this faith? So I'd like to hear about your experience of that, Sona.
Well, I'd like to just go back to Sraddha a moment and just say that, because in a way it explains how these other things arise out of it. But when I had this experience when I was about 13, realising that I was trying to understand something vast with something very small, as it were, I also had a sense that there was more to mind, or more to my mind, than this little bit that I use for everyday purposes. And so when I discovered Bhante, the FWBO, and the Buddha and the Dharma, I immediately saw that meditation was probably a way of developing that other part of the mind. So I went to meditation classes, and often people say when they go to a Buddhist centre, it's a bit like coming home. And it was very much like that for me. I mean, the people there I could talk to them, and I could talk about the things that were the existential problems I had. And they're very, very supportive. And Bhante was very, very supportive. And gradually I learnt about the Buddha's basic teachings. And one of the things that struck me in the Buddha's teachings is that the Buddha seemed to emphasize, and certainly Bhante Sangharakshita emphasized this a lot, was testing things for yourself. He once said on a seminar I was on, if you wanted to know mind, then watch your own mind, or some words to that effect. So that's just, and I like that. I like to test things out from my direct experience. And so once he told me, I can't remember where, maybe it was at a dinner table, so I lived with him for a while, that he said, one is never really, or people are never really happy unless they are making an effort to practice the Dharma. And so I really reflected on that, because I used to have moods of, thought I was practicing the Dharma, and then I'd get into a mood a bit lonely or a bit negative, or cravings for things. And so I reflected a lot on this, and
Could you just say that statement again, because I think it's important.
that we're never really happy unless we're making an effort to practice the Dharma.
Wow.
So then I was sort of thinking about that and thinking, well, what does it really mean to practice the Dharma? And of course, the first thing I learned, I suppose, of the Dharma were the precepts. And the very first precept I understood to be the most important one, the one of not doing harm, of being kind, of loving, and all the other precepts sort of fell out of that. They were just different ways of operating that. So I kind of joined up this practice of being kind and caring. And certainly later in life, when it was probably about another 18 years of being a Order member, I kind of had another kind of moment, dark night of the soul, where I realised all my thoughts were just a load of rubbish, and they were just based on views. And how could I trust any of those views? Because they were just thoughts reinforcing the views. And in the end, I just thought, the only thing I can do really is just be kind. Just go and find someone to be kind to, and be generous. And of course, I linked this as well later on with these words. I think it was Vishpani who mentioned from the Dhammapada the other day.
It's
Nagbodhi, sorry. That he who acts with an impure mind, or they who act with an impure mind, that suffering follows them like a cart follows the horse that draws it. And those who act with a pure mind, happiness follows like the shadow. So I think I was trying to test that out, and it seemed to work actually. That when you didn't scratch your head then, you looked at the watch.
So that was my timer going off. So I'm just going to stand up now to stretch my back. That's my timer going off. Yeah, keep going.
And I just lastly really, where was I?
The Dhammapada.
Yeah, so I was really trying to understand how to, was I suffering if I practice, if I let myself give in to my sort of faults, my cravings and attachments and ill wills and things like that, did I experience suffering? And I did see a connection actually. Life seemed to go along a lot better when I was being kind to people, when I was being less self-centered, trying to help people. And then I tried to devote my life to it in ways, probably from a selfish point of view. I wanted to be happy. But at the same time, I was helping a lot of people. And I did see a connection that if you could act with a pure mind, and this just reinforced more and more confidence. And a bit like you, where you found that you needed to work on your mind, I suppose ever since then, it's just been expanding. And as it expands, it seems to, like consciousness seems to let in more light, as it were, become more luminous. And you feel bigger and happier and more joyful. So for me, it's a kind of natural transition. It's almost like, well, this is how the world reality is it from suffering and realizing that you can work with that. You can get to a state of confidence, and from that state of confidence in the Buddha, Dharma, and the whole way of working on your mind, both bringing attention and mindfulness and kindness to things, then joy sort of erupts out of that. So that's how I came to that, and then it's just gone on and on really. I kind of sit and. But before I say anything else about that, I'd quite like to hear some of you. That was rather a long explanation.
No, but it was really important, because I think, just to really draw out something that you said, that you sort of passed over it quite lightly, but I was around you at that time, and I think it was a massive moment where you realised that the most important thing was just to be kind. The most important thing, we can worry about sort of insight in a sort of more intellectual way, but that it was the act of being kind towards other people and yourself. And I think it's just a great thing for us all to hear. And I'd like to hear a bit more about your meditation practice, but maybe I'll say a little bit of something first. So So we've got dukkha, we've got faith, and then do these more expansive states more naturally arise? I guess that's the question. I think they do. Yeah, I mean, it's testing it out on one's own experience, and it's just a list, isn't it? The spiral path. I've just said all those words. It's an energetic trend, an emotional trend of confidence and opening. And there's a kind of release of energy and then a calming of energy. That seems to be what's been described. And I would say that's been what I've experienced over time. It's not like once and for all, but the gesture I describe it as to myself is moving from living life with a tight fist to living life with an open hand. So just letting everything kind of pour through and flow through. And if I do that with my body starts to kind of soften and open instead of having these little tight fists of contraction. Emotionally, it's kind of and then mentally, it's like letting go of the tight fists in the mind. And just as an aside, I'm really inspired by a saying from Dogen: body like a mountain, heart like the ocean, mind like the sky. And even just hearing those words, it is like there's something that releases. I haven't had, like pretty. I haven't had really, I don't experience pretty the way I think some people do, because some people are jerk and they sort of, you can literally see, energy releasing. And the way you've sometimes described it sounds very powerful. I don't think I've really had it like that. I think with me, it's been very gradual and very gentle. Bliss, it's a big word, isn't it? I don't know if I have bliss, but I do have experiences of openness. And I guess I think for me, that's all that really matters. Am I tending towards contraction? Am I tending towards openness? And when I'm tending towards more openness, there definitely is something that I could perhaps label as, well, certainly joy, rapture, I don't know, calm, bliss, and then concentration in the sense of integration and unification. Yes, definitely, there is that sense. And a lightness. I mean, I'll just finish on this note for this little section, that one of the really unexpected consequences of decades of practice is becoming more lighthearted. Like I never expected that. I never thought, I think I thought, being a spiritual person was being quite serious. But then I've definitely become much more lighthearted in the sense of sort of able to hold everything much more lightly. And I think that's all these words I've just said, probably lightheartedness might be one of the ways of describing that. So I'd like to hear a bit more from you now, Sona, about your practice. Because it's quite, I'll just say just for the rest of you that, we sit opposite each other in the shrine room in the mornings, and sometimes I'm sitting there and I've got a lot of pain and it's not quite, it can be quite hard work just to sort of be present and be open. And I open my eyes to look at Sona, and he just looks so happy. You look so grounded and so present, a little smile on your face. And I think it'd be really inspiring for people to hear what actually goes on for you when you're in those states.
Well, I don't do it every day. But yeah, I have been meditating for 46 years. So one would expect to have made some sort of progress. And usually when I sit down and I start paying attention to what's going on, I seem to relax and become, I kind of suppose, just bigger and more open. And a lot of the practices I do are sitting with the Bodhisattvas and Buddhas. So I've been doing the same sadhana for 46 years, and I do another one as well, so I alternate them every day. And I have a shrine, and I look at a photograph of Bhante, and I look at the Buddhas. There's we have a rupa of Padmasambhava and one of White Tara. The two practices I do is one of the Buddha or Amitabha, and there's Bhante and a couple of his teachers. I just sort of feel happy. I just feel so much gratitude that I've got away from this fear that I experienced as a child. I'd like to come back to something, because I think there's something that drives you that doesn't seem to drive me in terms of the dukkha. That my dukkha, the existential, I think I've dealt with it more or less. But yeah, it just becomes a sort of an interesting morning, an hour morning sit. Sometimes if I do it too much, though, I get a bit weird in the day. I kind of feel like I don't want to do anything. And it's a bit like it's difficult to think about things and things. So it has certain sort of consequences. But yeah, it's just very, very pleasurable, I find, meditating. But I think actually I probably believe, just judging by how much time I give to different things, that it's more effective in the long run to change myself by action. That actually, I have a great opportunity looking after you. You have certain needs which I can help you with. And, I've been trying to teach the Dharma when I can and so on. And when I do these things, I can kind of pour into that as well. So I think that all adds to working with the first precepts of being kind and caring for other people. But I just got a lot of confidence, I suppose. I don't know if I've got unshakable confidence. One never knows until you're really tested if life became absolutely awful. But at the moment, it just feels fairly easy after all this time. And it may be worthwhile just mentioning the spiral path isn't always just going up and up.
Yeah, good.
That it's often more like a circle. You go up a bit and you suddenly come back down to where you were before. So for many, many years, there was kind of going round and confusion and depression. Probably never experienced sort of serious clinical depression, but just feeling down and is it worth going on and things like that. But then I used to commit myself to doing things, so that would force me out of it. In fact, I felt people were depending on me. So, but yeah, I'd like to hear, because you come from this position of like, well, you still have dukkha all the time, I know, and you have to take certain medications and things for it. You have to do a lot of exercises and things to keep yourself in not so much pain. So you've got a whip, you've got a kind of something coming with whip, and now you've got a carrot as well that's sort of attracting you. And probably we've heard enough about whips and dukkha on the retreat. So maybe you could tell us a bit more about your carrot and what draws you on. And I think you also said something which I just want you to remind you, it's very, very important, is how you approach these things. The sort of not too difficult.
Yeah.
Yes. If you could say something more about that, great.
Okay, that's good. Yes. I think the whip and the carrot is quite a good way of looking at it, because obviously, I have been very motivated by dukkha, because life was just utterly intolerable when I didn't have any way of working with my mind. So that's very, very motivating. And I've also found it equally important to have something attractive I'm moving towards, which is the vision of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, as you say. And it's quite a delicate business, sort of getting those two things in a wise relationship. In my early years of practice, I could really relate to what Vimala Chitta was talking about last night. My early years of practice felt like I was making, reasonable progress. Then the coat didn't quite fit anymore. And what I realised is my practice had been on some level escapist. So I had this vision and I was trying to get there, and I was trying to suppress and avoid my direct experience. And I think many of us do that. It's kind of very understandable. But generally speaking, we have to turn back and address that at some point. So I think, putting it very crudely, I'd seen the Buddhist goal a bit like heaven. If I'm a good Buddhist, I'll go to heaven and I won't have any pain anymore. I genuinely thought if I was a good Buddhist, my back pain would go away, which seems so ridiculously naive now, but I can also feel quite forgiving towards that young woman that interpreted the Buddhist teachings in that way. So then I've had to sort of go back and do all the practices we're doing on this retreat about being with what's actually happening, being with direct experience, and this teaching of approach as opposed to avoid. So I'm going to give you a kind of image now, which came to me a while ago. So imagine that you're in this kind of building, very stark, cold. It's like a concrete room, and there's little windows right up in the ceiling with bars on the windows, and you can see outside. So you can see a tiny bit of sky, but you're in this cell really. And initially, you don't even see the window. You're just curled up on a little ball. You don't even see the window. And then at a certain point, you see the window, which I guess might be like the arising of faith, that there is another way. And then you don't know how to sort of bridge those two experiences of being in this little prison, and there's this glimpse of something. And you start going, and you sort of uncurl and start exploring the room. And then at a certain point, you find this magical doorway in the wall. And so, you start pushing against it to try and force it open, and it doesn't open, it's completely immovable. And then let's just imagine it's got a handle, so you start yanking it towards you, and again, it doesn't work. And I think that's kind of willful practice, metaphorically. And then you realize that you have to sort of, so here's the door, you have to kind of go really close. You have to go really close, and you just have to touch it with this exquisitely sort of delicate, caring, perfect attention, perfectly balanced awareness. And then the door swings open and you can go outside. And you are in a totally different perspective on the same experience. So you still got the room, you still got the sky, and you still got the bars on the window. But now you're in this vast expanse rather than curled up a little ball in the room. So that touching the door, that's a bit like working with the Vedana that we've been talking about this week. That I sometimes see the gap that we have in the teaching is like a magical doorway. And you have to learn how to meet, come really close to your experience, and then boom, you sort of open up to something more expansive.
And do you ever find yourself back in the room? Or have you gone out through the door?
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Thank
you. Of course, I found myself back in the room. Or often I'm back in the room. But I now know, this is what's really amazing. I now know I can open that door. But if I'm impatient, I start pushing against the door. I just want to get out. That won't work. Yanking, that won't work. I have to kind of, this is where it ties in with all the teachings of this week. You have to come very close to what's actually happening and just this exquisite sort of effort.
Do you think that's a form of Shraddha, confidence?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's a good example, because actually I've learned the skill, if you like, of how to open the magic door. And we can all do that.
So what happens when we start going up the spiral? Where do we,
so that's good. So how are we doing for time? Maybe another 5 minutes and then we'll stop. So of course there's knowledge and vision of things as they really are. You go through all these states of increasing expansion, and it calms down, calm, integration, and then we get closer to living aligned with things as they really are. So how do you understand that in your own experience?
Well, I suppose I look at it slightly different. Like as you become more aware, maybe more aware that you've been doing a lot of things for yourself, you also begin to go a bit deeper with like the first precept and realize actually, to have a really pure mind rather than an impure mind, it would be like to forget a bit about yourself and look at other people. And there comes a time where you just kind of realize there's just so much suffering. I mean, I think one of my problems is I get overwhelmed by it. I just can't, I can't participate in a lot of the discussions that go on, because it's just like more and more suffering. So I have to take it a bit at a time. But there's just so much suffering out there in the world. And I'm totally convinced that when we work and we teach people how to use their minds, that at least some of that suffering, and a lot of that suffering, because a lot of people cause other people suffering. And if we can just help people to use their minds more, it would be a big reduction in suffering. And not only that, I definitely feel, and my experience seems to bear this out, that it's what human beings have to do. And if you're not doing that, you'll never be happy.
What do you have to do?
You have to be helping other people
Okay.
to expand their consciousness and overcome the suffering. A lot of it's self-inflicted,
Like
as we know, the second and the third and the fourth and fifth, and all those other arrows that we've got a terrible habit of just sticking in ourselves. When we realise we're doing it, it's very difficult to control other people, as we all know, but at least we have some sort of agency towards ourselves and being able to transform our own minds. And I think this is a wonderful expression of kindness, trying to give that.
So it's interesting. So I find this very inspiring. So you're describing knowledge and vision of things as they really are as kindness.
Well, I think it's seeing suffering and realising we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And you can't gain enlightenment on your own.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even make sense. And because you somehow feel connected to everything else. So there's a sort of, I guess at some point, a transition where you step right over and you are just doing it purely for others. I'm not sure I've reached that point yet. I'm certainly aware that one could behave more like that. But and maybe you should say a little bit about your experience just to finish with.
Okay, yeah, we'll finish.
Run out of time.
Yeah, we'll finish it at this point. Yeah, I mean, I find it really inspiring and helpful because, of course, when we're hearing about the spiral path, it can all just sound like sort of refined hedonism almost. I'm just sitting having these lovely, blissful experiences. But what is the point of that? Well, it's obviously pleasant and nice to not just be grinding away with loads of dukkha. And what you're bringing in is the vision aspect, I guess. The point is to break down this sense of separation and isolation. And I'm very moved by that as well. And we had that poem last night from John O'Donoghue. Can't remember it exactly, but it was something like flowing like a river, full of surprises, something like that.
Yeah,
I can't remember either. I'm sorry.
I do want to.
But it was this idea that sort of life. You realise everything is fluid and open as opposed to closed down and static, and the fluid and open nature of everything includes others. It's not just I'm a river, but you're also a river, and our rivers aren't separate from each other.
I mean, that is a very clear, kind of conceptual, reasoned experience. But I do remember when I first, got to know you, that you discovered John Kabat-Zinn and you started working with mindfulness and pain and things. And then you realised actually you had to do something on your own. But and then you started running classes in Manchester once a week. But you weren't satisfied with that, were you? There was something. It almost seemed to me like something more erupted in you, and that took you over.
Yeah. I mean, that's. I'm feeling quite emotional now because I think when I learned that 1 in 5 people live with chronic pain in the developed world, probably about 1 in 3 live with long-term health conditions. There's billions of people. And go on. The majority of that suffering is second arrows. The majority of human distress is second arrows. And I've been lucky enough to have been given this most extraordinarily precious gift of encountering the Dharma and even the truth of the Salatha Sutta and the 2 arrows. And it completely breaks my heart. That there's billions of people in the world who are suffering unnecessarily. We can't get rid of the pain, but all this extra torment that we pile on. And how could I not dedicate my life to sharing this gift with other people that I've had the almost miraculous good fortune to stumble across. Like, what are the chances? Here I was, a girl in New Zealand coming across the Dharma. What are the chances of that?
Yeah.
And it's like, how can you not share that?
Yeah.
Because it's utterly tragic. It's utterly tragic that we're all going around suffering more than we need to. So that's a big part of why I do what I do.
Well, I think you kind of really borne out what Bhante told me in the first place, is that if you make an effort to follow the Dharma, then you can't be happy. I think you said you can't be happy, really satisfied, unless you were making an effort to practice the Dharma. And it seems to me that's what you've realised, that you've just you are living, practicing the Dharma, something sort of kept taking you over almost. And it's as though it's natural. It's just like, maybe that's what reality is. It's just aligning yourself with what is normal and natural. And one does sort of step away from the tightness of self to expanding to the connectedness of everyone.
And I think, as you're saying, it's a sort of natural expression of practice. It's not something forced. But how can we not do whatever we can to ease suffering in the world?
Well, thank you, Vidyamala.
Thank you.
I think we've run out of time now. So. And I hope that was helpful and enjoyable to watch and listen to us. So thank you. We'll be going on for a meditation in...
Shall we have a
20 minutes?
Yeah, 20-minute break. So that's at 5 to 12, is it?
Yeah, why don't we say 12?
Yeah, why don't we say 12? And in the break, you could just look for the magic door in your experience to something a bit more open. And so we'll come back at 12. And Sona's going to lead the practice this morning. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, good experiment.
Thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you for sharing so generously.
Very good experiment. Thank you.
We can't see the chat from here, can we? Let's have a look at the chat. You don't need that yet.
How do I go
Just turn the screen off and the sound off.
Chats, where's chat?
Turn the video and then mute us. Okay, I can't hear you, Sona. It's not working. No.
No, not working.
Oh, yeah, it's working now. Yeah, it's working. Working now. Yeah, it's working.
Okay. Is it working well enough to lead the meditation with?
Sounds brilliant. Brilliant.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I'll just turn that off for a minute and turn it back on in a minute. Okay, good.
About 3 minutes, everybody.
We need to know if they can hear us.
So can somebody?
Can you hear us? Okay.
Can you not? Good.
Okay.
Yes.
Does it sound good? Good quality.
Good quality. Actually, it's me. I got the mic here. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Thumbs up.
Good.
Excellent.
You might need to move it around. Shall I move in a bit?
I can move a bit.
Want to include you. Turn the camera a wee bit that way. Just, yeah. There you are. Oh, right, okay. Oh, well, I could just start by introducing the Rupa. What's this? Is that Papa? Is that?
Let's just shut your money.
Okay. This isn't just Shakyamuni. This is Shakyamuni. This is a White Tara Rupa that I inherited. And this is another Shakyamuni, little black, heavy black Rupa that Sangharakshita gave me. He said he wanted to give me something heavy and dark. So I don't know why. And then there's Padmasambhava there. There's a photograph of Bhante a bit older there. One when he was quite young in his long hair and robes. And then Dada Rinpoche there. And then there's even a red, dark red Tara. Who now someone, was that mine or yours?
I look at the era.
Oh yeah, someone I gave the practice to, and they gave me that copy of Tanka. So, and there's a few more Buddhas down here. So, and then of course we got the Vajra dagger, just to ward off any evils. So we're going to start the meditation now. It's just gone 12 for half an hour. And what I thought we'd do is I kind of just lead you into a bit of a practice covering some of the things we talked about together this morning. Okay, maybe a little bit longer, 40 minutes. So let's just start by allowing ourselves to settle as best we can. Just remembering to, if you're sitting up, remembering about the head being very heavy and aligning the head with the spine, the body, so that the weight is not being held by muscles because it's dropping forwards or tensing up, dropping back, and you're not leaning with the head to one side or the other. But you could just kind of wiggle a little bit, loosening as best you can, joints, making sure your hands are supported well. And yeah, if you're leaning back, resting back into a sofa or something, you probably need to decide whether you want to stay awake or be more alert, in which case, if you can raise yourself up a little bit, it might be the best thing for you is just to relax backwards, so it's up to you. But again, it's usually meditation is supported through having a sense of balance and being alert. So yeah, what does the body, what's the kind of feeling in the body? Are there lots of aches and pains? Does it feel very solid, fixed, stiff? Or is it fairly fluid? And really, when we're sitting, ideally, and even also if we're lying down or resting backwards, we can just let go into this force of gravity, this very mysterious force that is holding every single molecule, every cell of our body. It's pulling it down. We don't have to resist it. It's enough to just let the earth, the chair, the bed, whatever we're on, let that do the resisting for us, and we can kind of settle into it, into the body. And allowing the senses to, don't need to pay too much attention to what's going on outside. The senses will keep operating because they're one of our chief sense. This is the way in which we, our chief way of telling if there's danger around. So hopefully we're in a safe place and we can trust that. And we can come in, draw in, maybe in and down, having a sense of where our heart is, the region across the chest. Not thinking about the heart or the chest, but paying attention to it, paying attention to any sensations there. And surprisingly, you can actually pay attention to the chest and the heart region even if there aren't sensations, even if there are no sensations. You think, oh, I can't feel anything, can't feel very much there, but you have a sense of that area. And of course, there's this life-giving air coming in, full of oxygen, which is transformed and absorbed into the blood, delivered to the cells, and with the fuel from the food we eat, it combusts in a way and turns into energy. All very mysterious energy. Keeps us alive. And this is us paying attention to ourselves as being human. And as we settle down, I'd just like to suggest that you might, it's kind of invitation really, it's up to you whether you do it, is go back in time in your life where you may have had some kind of aha moment, some kind of awakening to the fact that you have a mind. And this mind can pay attention to things outside of you, and it can pay attention to experiences inside. A mind that's recognizing all the stuff of the world we live in and the experiences in our body. Very often turning them into thoughts with words, using language. We can actually think without language, but it's a slightly different type of thinking, kind of letting go into. So experiencing the body breathing and then just recalling a moment and how it felt. Oh, yes. You may have felt like you've come home to something, or you discovered something. It's as though your consciousness was born again. So mind in the Buddhist tradition means both kind of head and heart, probably more heart than head. So maybe we could just spend a little time now reflecting on the fact that we can pay attention. We can pay attention to a direct experience. Could be a thought, could be a feeling, could be a sensation. Or it could be one triggering another that triggers another, that triggers another, that triggers another. It's one, as it were, one wing of the dove. And the other wing is loving kindness that expresses itself as compassion when it meets suffering. Two wings of the dove. The dove, a symbol for peace. Paying attention with a sense of kindness, gentleness, not a weak, frail kindness, but robust, strong, passionate love, almost a flashing forth of loving kindness, lighting up our sense of being, lighting up the world. When I meditate and I say that I'm with the Buddhas, I'm probably imagining the Buddhas, but in my direct experience, the Buddhas are there in my imagination. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it's direct experience comes in many forms. You can have a direct experience of something you imagine. You do this if you like chocolate and you imagine chocolate, you have this sort of longing for chocolate. So with the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or even a teacher, or even the teachings, the Dharma, or the Sangha, you can have a sense of opening out, opening up to, opening the heart, which is the mind, including yourself. And you may get a sense of joy, brightness. Even if there's pain and difficulties, we can pay attention to that, acknowledge it, allow it to be there. If we're aware that we have habits that just generate more suffering, maybe for a moment we can just be aware that they're habits. And it's as though we're just opening up to something new, mysterious, something warm, tender, strong, caring, confidence giving. And just carry on like that. You can come back to your breathing if your mind wanders too much. Breathe with a kindly, loving breath. And something I find very helpful to reflect on is that as I'm sitting here breathing, my body is emitting vibrations. Everything's, even all molecules are kind of vibrating. So waves traveling through the particles. Light is a form of vibration, it's a frequency. Sound. And when we think, if we use our brain, that's going to cause vibrations. Maybe if we use our heart, we think with our heart, that causes vibrations too. These little waves from us. And we're all interact with one another. Waves that fly across the river. my way of video, being in ways, sometimes we can feel a resonance with others. So there's somewhere between 20 to 30 of us or more on this retreat. We're all connected through the mystery of wires, Wi-Fi, vibrations, electronic signals. What would it be like if we all tuned in to metta, letting metta fill our hearts as though we're one large composite being? Each one of us is like a cell of a larger being, giving our energy, our support to, we could even imagine the retreat bodhisattva. Just allow those thoughts to float through your mind, noticing if they make any difference or not. You could also have the thought that others are probably thinking of you. You don't need to block them out. They mean no harm. Each of us can receive the love, kindness from the rest of us. And one of the suggestions of Bhante Sangharakshita is that the bodhicitta, the kind of bursting forth of the will to enlightenment for the sake of all beings, comes about from more than one individual or group of individuals, all joining together, focusing collectively on our own suffering and the sufferings of the other people on the retreat, in this composite body of ours. We're not alone, co-joined. And this retreat bodhisattva that is us, joined together, can have a big effect in the world around us. And just breathing with that, breathing together. We all want to be happy, we all want to avoid suffering, and we wish others freedom through their mind, being able to use their mind to free themselves from all unnecessary suffering. Why wouldn't we want to do that, as Vidyamala said? if we find that we're wandering off and getting distracted, and just recognizing this is what it is, this is what's happening. It's quite normal. But maybe something's also touched us. A sense there's something bigger, more that we're participating in. Even sitting with that thought can change our experience. Just paying attention to something changes it. So that concludes the morning sessions. So we had an idea in the team meeting yesterday, if the tech team's there, if it's possible to stop the recording and just leave the room open, and those who want to eat lunch or be together could, do that, maybe making sure that you're not just speaking all the time, but have a conversation with one another. You could listen to other people's conversations and just spread your love around. So see you in a while.